Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Up for Women, Speak Up to Lead Up. Again, I am your humble host, Colleen Biggs, and I am excited to have two extremely strong women with me today that we're going to be interviewing, Celeste Barclay and Molly Galbraith. And I didn't even ask her if that's how she spells or says her name. So just pray that I said it right, but she can correct me when I have her on here in just a minute. So I just want to take this moment. For some reason this morning, I'm feeling like this overwhelm of gratitude. And I think it's because I've been planning for a 3-day event that we launched August 11th. And so for some of you watching this live, that's next week. For those of you listening to it through your podcast, that was a couple of weeks ago. And I just am thankful for the services and the people that have surrounded me to help me, inspire me, influence me, and really help get me on the road to remember that sometimes we need to let go and let God lead. Now, not everyone believes in God like I do, but it's my podcast. So we can talk about God on here if we feel like it. That's how I do things in my life. Kind of like the Lead Up for Women, the community, which is at leadupforwomen.com for all of you that are following us. I believe in God and I believe in faith. And I believe that I live in my head bubble a lot, like many entrepreneurs do. And so today, I want that to kind of be something that, you know, is encircling us as we think about how could we let go and let our, I don't know if you want to call it universe, energy, inspiration, intuition, God, whatever you want to call it. How can you let go and get out of your head bubble and allow your intuition to guide you more as an entrepreneur for the things that we should be doing, not feeling like the things that everyone else is telling us to do, right? When are you shutting that out and listening to yourself and what you know is right for you? So I'd like everyone to take that with them this week. And as we get into our first interviews, Molly is someone I met not too long ago. We jumped on the phone. We were introduced. We had just like a quick phone conversation. And I just loved her so much. I wanted her to be on the podcast. And for those of you that are watching on our Lead Up for Women page, she sent me her book here, Strong Women Lift Each Other, which is the reason why I named our episode today Strong Women, because you'll get what I'm saying when we get to our next guest, Celeste Barclay. You'll understand why this is a seamless thread of strong women here on today's podcast. But Molly is, she's just such an inspiration. And what I love about Molly is that she works with girls. You know, it's not just at the level of women, which most of us find that we're all screwed up at this age anyway. And we're trying to undo everything that happened at childhood that we were modeled to become who we need to become. And Molly is the co-founder of Girls Gone Strong, the world's largest platform, providing evidence-based, interdisciplinary, health, fitness, nutrition, and pregnancy education for women and the health and fitness professionals who work with them. I just talked about her Strong Women Lift Each Other Up, a practical, actionable guide to help women overcome self-doubt, gain unshakable confidence. Girlfriend, you are speaking my language right now, and create a better world with more opportunity for women and girls. And let me tell you, it starts with our girls. So Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Colleen. It's an honor to be here.
Unshakable confidence. It's something that, it's interesting. If you would see the advertisement right now for my 3-day event, it's about being unshakable, having unshakable confidence, invincible, unbreakable, and unstoppable. And it starts, we just keep, if we keep repeating the same steps that we're repeating as women, and we're not showing up for ourselves and we don't have that confidence, we're modeling that to our children, right? So then the girls are seeing this person that's not confident or authentic. And then what do you think she models when she gets older? She models the same thing. So it's like insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Molly, how did you get into wanting, was it as a girl that you noticed this and it was on your heart? Tell our listeners about your stories so they know when you first realized it or when this became your mission.
Yeah, thanks. That's such a good question. So I grew up with a lot of scarcity. So my parents divorced when I was really young. My dad was an unsuccessful politician, which doesn't pay very well. We didn't have a lot of money, had utilities shut off. There's just this feeling of like not enoughness. I didn't have the cool clothes. I didn't have a lot of friends. I switched schools at a young age and was kind of like the weird smart kid. And so I grew up with this feeling of not enough. So like, there's not enough for me and my sisters. There's not enough money for what we want, things like that, feeling like I wasn't good enough. And so I grew up with this intense sense of scarcity. And for me, it ended up really manifesting in my body. Never felt pretty enough, thin enough, lean enough, good enough. I also never felt, popular enough, cool enough, those kinds of things. I really struggled with that for years. Summer before I started high school, my mom graduated law school, was working. We had a little bit more money. I finally made the cheerleading squad after 3 years. I hit puberty. So like I show up, first day of high school and I'm a cheerleader. I had enough money to highlight my hair blonde and I basically grew breasts overnight. And instantly, Colleen, everyone in school who had teased me or made fun of me or ignored me all of a sudden wanted to be my friend. And so it taught me at this very tender age that the way that I looked was more important than who I was. And that was really challenging for me. And so I felt like other girls were my competition for, to be the prettiest, to be the smartest, to be the best cheerleader, to have the cute boyfriend, things like that. And it really kind of stuck with me for decades. And I got kind of engulfed in like, gossip and diet, culture and like reality TV and sorority life and all this kind of stuff. And I constantly felt like other women and girls were my competition. And I kind of had a big epiphany about 10 or 11 years ago. I became a coach and trainer in 2004. And around 2010, I partnered with my former business partner, and we opened a gym that was primarily focused on helping women. And day in and day out, I would go in the gym, I would help other women, I would help them get strong, I would help them reach their goals. And I started realizing how passionate I was about helping them. If you rewind just a little bit, I had a massage therapist that I started working with shortly after I got into training. And she was the first woman, Colleen, that I had ever heard never say a negative thing about another woman. She deeply loved other women. She was passionate about them. She was so affectionate towards them. She worked with an organization in my town that helps women who are escaping human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And she just I had never heard a woman have such deep affection for other women. So that really planted a seed in me. So fast forward a few years and I started realizing how much I liked helping women too. And one day I stumbled across the phrase strong women lift, which of course, I'm a lifter, right? I'm into strength training. So I was like, yes. And then it was each other up. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then I was like, am I really lifting women up? Is that what I'm doing in my life? And so it kicked off this really kind of intense introspection for me, asking, okay, I'm helping women get strong in the gym, but am I really lifting them up in all of the ways that I could? And so that has, kicked off probably a 10 or 11-year journey of just really being hyper focused on helping other women, not just with their physical health, but also with their mental health, with their body image, with overcoming the same feelings that I had of scarcity, comparison, jealousy, and just really realizing that when we as women feel strong, confident, and empowered in our lives and bodies, we can change the world.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to say congratulations on making the cheer team, because I never did, even though I tried out over and over and over again.
It's heartbreaking.
And I remember feeling sad and embarrassed when I would go to school. I was raised in the same type of family. I don't know if anyone on here even knows what Yellow Front is, but if you live in Arizona, it's like not a second hand, but it's a very low. And it would be like taking your children shopping at Walgreens or CVS for clothes for high school. That was where I got to shop. And so it was super embarrassing. I went through the same thing, but with no money. We were on food stamps when I was in high school. And I just remember how cruel other people were. And it really was about what you look like or if your parents had money. I didn't realize until I was at the age of probably 21, driving past an old trailer place where my best friend lived. And it wasn't until I was 21 years old with my daughter in the back in a car seat. And I drove by and said, my best friend lived in a trailer park. Never realized it.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that like the blinders are on? So talk to me, Molly, about how, I mean, first of all, we're so aligned in what we do. That's why Lead Up for Women exists. It's about lifting other women. It's about no mean girls here. They're not invited in this club. And I say that because I was surrounded by a lot of that in corporate America. And it was very scary. It didn't feel very good. So talk to me about how you're able to take your work and affectionately focus on girls at the same time, because women, as they're older, we can help mold and change and lift and create that confidence. But as girls, we don't have any influence on the outer world of what's happening in their schools. And, there's a lot of mean girls out there. How are you able to help them feel confident to almost protect their hearts and their souls and their self-esteem?
Yeah. Yeah. So our big focus is actually on helping the women who are raising and teaching and modeling for the young girls. So the moms, the teachers, the aunties. I'm an auntie myself. I just dropped my niece and nephew off shortly before this interview. We went on a little 2-day trip. So we teach women how to embody what it means to be a strong woman who lifts other women up, because then they in turn role model that for girls. So we know that moms are the number one, like how moms feel about themselves are the number one predictor of how young girls feel about themselves. So we can talk about media, we can talk about social media, all of that stuff is really important. But the way that a mother feels and talks about herself and other women and her body is going to be the number one predictor of how girls do as well. So that's what our main focus is. And that's how we feel like we can really get to the root of what's going on, because there are so many awesome programs out there for girls, things like Girls on the Run and things like that, right? And we feel like, okay, if we can get to the mothers or the role models or the, teachers or the aunts who are with the kids so much, that we can really make a significant difference. Because I think a lot of moms don't realize how much of an impact that their behavior, their words, even the ways that they talk about themselves might be impacting their young girls. So we feel like that's such a powerful way that we can kind of get to the bottom of what's going on and impact girls the most with our work.
Yeah. What is the one thing, Molly, that you remember your mom saying that has stuck with you when you were younger that was a negative effect on your life?
I can remember, and this is something that we've actually talked about as an up. So she did obviously so many amazing things that were positive, but one of the things that I think had a negative impact on me was my mom had some really traumatic experiences as a teenager. And she was really scared for me that I would encounter the same stuff. So anytime I wore something that was tight or fitted, I'm a very curvy woman, I'm a very busty woman. And even so, as a late in my teenage years, anytime I would wear something tight or wear something curvy, she would say, girls like you can't wear things like that. And what she meant by, she said, men are going to look at you, they're going to stare at you, they're going to, they're going to leer at you. And so what that was teaching me was that there was something wrong with my body and that their bad behavior was my responsibility. And so, like I said, there were so many amazing things that my mom taught me. It's actually hard for me to come up with one that was negative, but that's one that we have since talked about and she's apologized for. She just said, I just wanted to protect you, right? I just wanted you to be okay. But what we know is clothing doesn't protect, girls and women from things like that, right? From predatory men and bad behavior. And so I would say that was probably the biggest one that stuck with me, was that if they were staring at me, if they were doing something to me, that it was my fault. When I was 11 years old, I was being followed around the mall by 2 men in their 30s. And I was told by the security guards that I shouldn't have been wearing such short shorts, because they wouldn't have been following me if I hadn't been wearing such short shorts. So, and again, this is 25 years ago, right? I was getting so many messages like that. Like that most places that would never fly today. They would put the onus of responsibility on the people who are behaving badly. But I would say that one definitely had a big impact on me.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just felt really impelled to ask that question, because there's one thing, and it's not like our moms weren't awesome and taught us all these great things, but the realization is what I'm trying to push here, is that we don't realize that one small thing that we do or say or model to our children, they watch us way more than they listen to us, right? And your mother said it in all good intentions, but
Even
that's
out of love,
not how you took it. And my mom was really crazy about her weight, and she would always like say that, she was too fat, or, she would say to people in the family, don't eat that, you're going to get fat, or whatever it may be. Well, then I grew up like with this bad relationship with food. And I've always been a very thin person because of that. I mean, I have a very small build, but a very thin person, sometimes scary at like 91 thin person, because it's not healthy. It wasn't good for me to like want to get fat. I always needed to be skinny. And my mom would always talk about her weight. And it wasn't even toward me. It was just, that's what I saw. So I modeled that. And I remember even feeling that way and talking to my daughters about that really upset them. And it's like, when they would get upset when they gain weight, I was a personal trainer. I always worked out. I was a runner. So it's like, well, stop eating fast food or stop shoving a hamburger in your face and you won't gain weight. And they would just get so mad at me, and I couldn't understand why they were upset. It's like, stop eating the crappy food and then you won't get fat. But it was an unhealthy relationship that I was taught at a very young age that I didn't realize. And I turned and modeled that to my own daughters.
Yeah. And then it teaches then if they do gain weight, then they're like, maybe I don't have my mom's love, right? Because I've been taught that fat is bad, right? So then it's like, well, if I am this thing, then I'm bad. And I remember a close friend of mine said that she, every morning she steps on the scale and weighs herself. And she said that, this is several years ago now, but she walked into the bathroom and her 2-year-old tapped her foot on the scale and then stepped on it. And the 2-year-old doesn't have any concept of what she's doing, right? She just knows that this is what she sees mom do every day. And so she was modeling that behavior for her.
It's even scarier when your daughters are older like mine and have kids, and you watch them say the exact same things and do the exact same things that you did. And you're an outside person looking in like, oh, don't say that. Don't do that. How did you learn? Oh, you learned that from me? What? Like, it's unconscious. So Molly, the work that you're doing is so important, because it really starts with the moms. No matter how old they are, it starts with the moms. So I just want to thank you so much for the work that you've put in to working with moms, and not just moms, but women in general, because you don't even have to have children to model the behaviors to your son, to your husband, to a spouse, to a partner, to a community member. If we want to lead up in our lives, we should be paying attention to becoming the best version of ourselves that we can, not trying to change everyone around us. Right, Molly?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I talk about in the last chapter of my book, is about being a role model. And so many of us don't realize that we are role modeling or influencing other people in our lives. Like you said, whether it's our spouse or our partner, or like I said, I just dropped my niece and my nephew off, and there's a lot of stuff that they learn from me and the time that we spend together, which is really fun and exciting. And I take that responsibility very seriously, the things that they're learning and role modeling from me and our coworkers and our friends. And especially, Colleen, I think when you start doing the Strong Women Lift Each Other Up, you start embodying that philosophy, when you start embodying Lead Up for Women, when you start taking on those leadership type roles and embodying that type of behavior, other people look at you and say, wow, like, I really respect what she's doing, or I really like what she's doing. She's so passionate, she's whatever. And then they start really paying attention, and you become an even stronger role model when you start stepping into those types of behaviors.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me how many women kind of back away or question it, like, she can't be sincere. Kind of like your masseuse, where you were like, could she really love women that much?
Yeah.
You question that, because that's not quote unquote normal behavior, which is super sad and makes me want to cry. Because it should be normal behavior for us to act that way and lift each other. And I believe, Molly, that the more that you and I and so many other women adhere to that as our mission, and that's what we're doing, is always being there to lift other women, all boats rise together. And that's going to change the future landscape for women forever.
I 100% agree. And, I do see this these feelings of scarcity and competition and comparison among women. But the thing is it's because we're operating within a false construct. We're operating within the idea that it's normal that only 7.4% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, or it's okay that only 2.8% of venture capital funding went to companies founded wholly by women, right? Women are underrepresented in most of the important places where decisions are made. So it makes sense if we go to a conference, there's 10 speakers, 1 or 2 of them are women. If you and I both want to speak there, Colleen, it makes sense that it's like, oh, well, if Colleen gets a spot, then maybe there's not a spot left for me, instead of saying, hey, why aren't there 5 spaces for women? Or why don't we create our own conference where we all get to speak, right? And that's what the Strong Women Lift Each Other Up philosophy is about. We say, okay, we see your false social construct that there's not enough room for all of us and that we can't all be successful and happy and have what we want and, are defined by our own version of success. And we're going to reject that narrative, and we're going to go do our own thing. We're going to go build our own table. We're going to go do our own conferences where there's enough seats for all of us. And I think that's what I was really trying to do with Strong Women Lift Each Other Up, is to show women like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. But if we're going to create this change, we have to work together to do it. Yeah. So we have to overcome these feelings of scarcity, comparison, jealousy, and say, you know what? A rising tide does lift all boats. And if we can work together, then we can create more opportunities for women and girls so that we don't have to live in this scarcity.
Amen, Molly. And each one of us are so unique. God made us very unique in our own right. You do not have the same fingerprint as someone else. There's millions of people on this earth, no similar fingerprint. I just want to remind everybody that you're so unique. Don't try to be like everyone else. You're not meant to be. They're all taken. So there's no one left to be like. So just be like yourself. So Molly, how can other women listening today, even men that want to refer this to their sisters or daughters or wives or mothers, how can they get on the movement of Strong Women Lift Each Other? Where do they go? How do they purchase your book? Let's talk about that, because every woman that I know, I'm begging you to get in contact with Molly, to get onto this movement, to really lead up for other women, because that's what's going to change the landscape forever. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So it's available at all major retailers. You can just do a quick Google of Strong Women Lift Each Other Up. If you want to go to my website, which is mollygalbraith.com, you can download free chapter 1 of the book, and you can also find all available retailers, including international. So there's going to be, the Amazon, the Target, the Kindle, the Audible. I read the audiobook myself. So if you're into audiobooks, I'm such a huge audiobook fan. I listen to them when I hike and when I walk. And so yes, I read the audiobook myself, and then it's also available in the UK, Canada, Germany, New Zealand, Australia. You can find all of those retailers when you go to mollygalbraith.com/book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Molly, for being here. And I just can't thank you enough for being a beacon for women. And let's get out there and create some more seats. That's what I want to see happen.
I would love to. And if anyone's on Instagram, I'm at the Molly Galbraith, and then on Facebook, I'm Molly Galbraith.
Great, Molly. Thank you so much for being here and inspiring us today and motivating us to lift other women. So I'm going to challenge each female listening to this podcast today to find one way that you can lift another woman today. Today is the day to do that, and just find even if it's a text message or you comment on how gorgeous she looks that day, whatever it may be. And then if she tries to deflect it, tell her, no, just say thank you and just help her let it land, because that's what we need to do, is help each other and lift each other. So thank you, Molly, for being here.
Thank you for lifting me up and having me. I know how much you put into cultivating your community, and I do not take it lightly that you have me on here. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for being here. All right, Celeste, Miss Author Extraordinaire. Oh my gosh, Celeste Barclay. Let's talk about her for a minute. So she's a nom de plume. Did I say that right? Because I looked it up and I was like, I've never really had to say that word out loud before. Let's just say that she writes full time, and she has 20 some books, but we're going to let her get into how many books she has. But here's an interesting piece about Celeste that some of you may not know, and we'll get into it a little bit more. But she and her parents actually immigrated to the United States when she was a baby. So she became a citizen just a few years later. She was an only child, As a family in Europe, Celeste traveled quite a lot from a young age, spending most of her summers in England, where her mother's family is. Celeste became accustomed to the rolling hills of Yorkshire. I wish I had an accent to use with that. And even now, England feels much like a second home. So her family and her settled in the Midwest, where she spent her childhood there. You know, she had looks to me like a very basic childhood, like some of us did, playing sports and doing some of the basics, but she devoured a lot of British classics and she read several French classics in their original version. Yeah, that's not normal for most children at that age. And nowadays, you can find Celeste driving along the Southern California coast where she's busy writing. So Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I have been so looking forward to this. So thank you for having me. And Molly, it has been wonderful listening to you. So much of what you said resonated with me as a former teacher. And, you know, I do write fiction, but the goals that I have for my readers really parallel the things that you said. So I was super intrigued and fascinated by what you were saying. So thank you for what you shared. And Colleen, again, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I want to ask you the same question. And I know I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but as you were thinking earlier when we were talking about what one thing has landed and stayed with you, and we're not going to, you know, this is not mean against our moms. We're just sharing things that have stuck with us that we didn't even, maybe our parents didn't even realize.
Oh, I wish I had spent some time preparing for that. I didn't know you were going to ask me.
That's okay. I tell you what, think about it. And toward the end, you can answer it.
What I was going to say is, you know, it was kind of similar to Molly's experience. And, you know, a lot of it was my mom's own insecurities about her appearance. And she's a retired university professor. So obviously education was very important. And, you know, the fact that she was often the only woman in her field at the time and, you know, having to prove to her male counterparts that she was just as intelligent, more so than most, and that, but at the same time, you know, that put her in the limelight quite a bit more than she would have liked. And so she was, you know, uncomfortable with that. And I definitely think that in many ways, you know, I tended to wear more subdued things and I was very bookish by my own nature. But, you know, being able to get to a point where I could stand up in the limelight and not be self-conscious took a long time. And then lo and behold, I become a teacher where I stand in front of people all day.
So crazy how we hide ourselves through clothes, you know, and don't speak up because we'd rather be in the shadows. And that could have been something that your mom, you know, was modeling for you growing up, you know, and being uncomfortable in the limelight. So thanks for sharing that with us. And I apologize for putting you on the spot. Sometimes stuff just comes to my head.
It's a great question.
Throw it out, but I like to put someone in the hot seat every once in a while, but nothing that I don't want you to be too uncomfortable with. So Celeste, it sounds like you had a pretty normal upbringing, except, you know, immigrating obviously from Europe and coming over here. But it sounds like you dove a lot into books. Your mother sounds like she was a very intelligent female, so quite the major role model for you. Tell us where the writing came in. When did you always want to be a writer, or did you just love books so much that you're like, no way? Talk to us about this story.
No, I am a frustrated perfectionist. I spent so many years stifling my creativity that I didn't even know that I had it anymore. You know, I have always enjoyed reading, but I was a tomboy through and through. I was, you know, in elementary school, the only girl out on the soccer field, and every single day, recess, before school, whatever it was. And, you know, I think that it is very typical that as we get older, the use of our imagination and that sense of creativity does get stifled as we start to lean towards having to do more analytical things. And, unless it's a really driving characteristic and you know that you want to be in a creative field, you tend to end up suppressing it. And so that's what happened to me, because as creative as I've discovered I am, I'm also very analytical. I went to college preparing to be an international corporate attorney, and that was the plan until I met and married a very handsome Marine. And that changed my career path significantly, knowing that we were going to move around, knowing that I wanted to have a family. And so I started to reflect upon, well, what are some of the other things that you've actually felt called to do along the road? Being an attorney is what you want. I think I would have been good at it, but what else has there been? Because I knew that wasn't the career path I wanted to follow. And I realized, time and time again, I was called to help. I was a tutor. I was a peer mentor. I was a coach. I was a personal trainer. I did all of these things that were in the helping profession. And I realized that I enjoyed teaching. And so that's what I pursued, partly so that I could ensure my own kids' education, so that I could be on a similar schedule to them, but also teaching is not just a career. It truly is a vocation. Those of us who stick with it, I was in the classroom for almost 16 years, do it because we feel compelled to help. And, as Molly was saying before, so the things that we do and the things that we model, I'm the mother of 2 sons, but I had tons of girls in my classroom. And even when I wasn't feeling particularly confident, or I wasn't in the mood to have to be a role model, I still knew that I was. And it was really, really important to me that my students, male, female, whatever the gender identification is, knew that they had value beyond the collective, and that each of their self-worth wasn't determined by me or anybody else. It was what they wanted to do and what they could accomplish, and helping them to see that. And so that was a really important part of being a teacher. And it was one of the things that I feared I would miss, that I wouldn't fill my self-help bucket, if you will, without teaching when I left the classroom. And I very quickly realized 2 things. One, that the escapism that I provide my readers, that they tell me about, is a different type of helping. I haven't forsaken that part of me to become an author. I've just translated it into a different means. And I also came to realize that there is a lot of stereotypes and stigma to the genre that I write in, and that to be able to continue and to do what I want and what I enjoy doing meant, putting that to the side and persisting through. And sometimes it means reading the room and saying, I write historical fiction instead of historical romance. But it's taken me a good almost 2 years before I really was like, you know what? I do what I do. I like what I do. And apparently I'm fairly good at what I do. So I'm going to own it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to read my books.
Thank you for owning it. Because I'm sitting here like, why would you stifle that? I'd walk in and be like, read one of my romantic, hot and steamy books, I think that's great, Celeste, and props to you, because most people don't realize that your children spend more time with their teachers than they do with you in your own home. And if I looked back at the people that I looked up to in my younger years, it was not my parents, it was my teachers. There were some teachers that changed my life, and I even reached out to them when I got older. So thank you. It's almost like thank you for your service, because it's the same. Thank you to your husband for his service. Thank you to you for your service of being a teacher. And thank you for not stifling that creativity anymore. So let's just dive into the books, because you are, now I know so many other authors. Sharon Lecter's a good friend of mine. She writes full-time as well, has done, 20 some, 30 some books over her time with Think and Grow Rich and, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and way, way back in the day. But talk to me about You're probably one of the first people I've ever met that just writes fiction books for a living. And I'm fascinated by that. I don't know why, but I'm fascinated by that because I feel like it's like these dreams that you have, and then you just like write down the dreams on paper of what you would want to see happen in your romantic life. What is it? Explain that to all of us that are on the edge of our seat to understand fiction books when they're steamy and romantic. Where's it coming from?
I joke and say that I live in a world of my own imagination. I'm like in the grown-up version of Mr. Rogers, world of land of make-believe. That's where I live. I talk to fictitious people all day long. And so it's actually really great. I'm a self-employed author. It is a business of me, myself, and I, so I don't have any HR problems. But it was one of those things where life circumstances presented itself. And I was recovering from surgery a few years ago. And I tell the story that I had watched all the Big Bang episodes that I could handle. They are on 24/7 if you just look. And it was great, but I was done. So I was on my tablet and I was scrolling through my local library catalog online. And I like historical fiction. I always have. So I stumbled across a historical romance and I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. I like history. So I started reading and, it was, there was some definite suspense in there. So there were some nail biting moments, but at the end I was like, oh, look, it's a happily ever after. And I read a couple more because I was like, I'm recovering from surgery. I want happily ever afters right now. I don't feel at my best. So I read a few more and I'm usually pretty quick on the uptake, but it took me like 5 or 6 books before I realized they were all going to have a happily ever after and that we would get through the nail biting moments and that they would end up together. And it just sort of stuck with me of like, oh, I love historical fiction, but in that particular genre, not everybody has a happily ever after. People die and things are left unresolved, but this is escapism. And it was really nice as a teacher and being a mom that I could set aside a few hours each day to disappear into the far, far past. I'm not a huge contemporary reader. I prefer historical because it is so removed from me and from what my everyday life is that I can kind of project myself into these characters. Whereas, with contemporary, I'm like, that's not my life. I'm happily married. I've been married for 18 years, but I'm not running off with a billionaire anytime soon. That's not me. I have a harder time sort of engaging. So after a few years, I started thinking, I've taught literature, I've taught composition, I've figured out how these stories go. I understand the story arc now that there's going to be a happily ever after. Why not give it a try? And so I started writing my first book in August of 2017. My husband was out of town. My kids were still going to bed at like 8 o'clock. So I would sit down and I would write, and I got about halfway through and then school started and I went back into the classroom. I went back to being a chauffeur. My husband was home and it just got kind of pushed off to the side. And I was like, well, that was nice. Maybe I'll get around to it. And then in January 2018, my husband's appendix ruptured and I thought he was just man sick. He was a little bit more than just man sick. He ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital. So needless to say, I feel a little guilty about not being a bit more empathetic, but he came out fit as a fiddle, but I was just frazzled. I was still going to work every day. I was still running my kids all over the place. I was driving up and down the freeway to see him in the hospital. And I just was toast by the time he came home. And I was like, I need something even more creative and cathartic than just reading. So I went back to that manuscript and I entered into the publishing industry without a clue what I was doing, which is very, very atypical. I like to strategize. I like to have a plan. I am very type A. I don't like to do things that I don't know that I'm going to do really well. And so I just kind of stumbled into this. I knew that I had ideas for several books that would be part of a series. And so I just tried it out, but I didn't tell a single soul. Like, I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my best friend, no one, because I figured if this wasn't going to work out, then nobody had to be any of the wiser. And that's also
no one would know. No one would know. You tell no one, and then failure's not a real thing.
Exactly. And between being a public school teacher and, if I failed, that's why I picked a pen name. I don't write under my real name. And, I kind of was like, oh, I like this. I want to write the next story and see what happens. And between book 2 and book 3, knowing that I wanted to keep doing this and enjoying what I was doing, I realized I needed to learn the business side of publishing, that I am my own small business. And so I did. I spent a lot of time absorbing all the information I could and better understanding the paths that I could take. And so between book 2 and book 3, the epiphany happened, and book 3 launched with a strategy. And all of a sudden it just took off. And I was hitting number 1 in multiple Amazon categories, and the income was flowing. And it was about a year and a half later when my income as an author was comparable to my income as a teacher. And I was in a really challenging assignment at the time. And I loved my students, but I didn't love the situation I was in. It was just really wearing me down. And I was feeling constantly like I was giving more than I was getting back. And the frustration and the sadness that went along with that just really started to get to me. And so I realized I had a viable alternative. I was starting to realize that, I'm helping, but in a different capacity. So I made the transition in January 2020. And little did I do not have the gift of second sight or anything like that about what was going to happen 2 months later. But I left the classroom in January 2020, and I am so happy that I did. It is so fulfilling. I don't have any days where I wake up and dread what I do, and that's also because I have the freedom of saying, oh, if I don't want to write today, okay, I'll work on marketing instead, or, I don't really want to deal with ads anymore, I'm going to write. I have that freedom, but truly it is. I always used to scoff at the idea when people would say, oh, it's not work if you love it. I'm like, a job is a job. It's not always fun. And now I'm like, oh, whoops. I get what you mean.
It's not work if you love it.
Okay, and I just was maybe not in the right place up until now. Yeah. And so I get it. And I find what I do really rewarding. And it's, like I said, I write in a genre where there's a lot of stereotypes, that it's just fluff, that there's no real history to it, that it's just about the sex, and, there's no intellectual capacity needed for the genre. And beyond finding that offensive, it's not true. I have a background in history, and I use that all the time. And I use my graduate degree in teaching when I incorporate these complex historical events in a way that my readers can understand and engage. And I use my graduate degree in political management as my business model. I know how to strategize. I know PR. And so I utilize those things. And those of us who are professional authors, be it full-time or part-time, those of us who treat this as a business have that to us. Those of us who are excelling go beyond just living in a world of our imagination. There's a lot more that happens on the back end than people realize. But I also, on the front end, really want to normalize for women the fact that they can read this and enjoy it, and that it shouldn't be embarrassing to them to enjoy these, because they are stories that have multiple layers. You know, I'm like Shrek, I'm an onion, I have lots of layers, and so do my readers, and so do my books. And so it has just been really sort of a personal mission to, you know, help people feel more comfortable in what they're reading, and to let the rest of the world know, but even before Bridgerton, that there's a lot more to us than just writing sex. I mean, that's a nice fun part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that.
I mean, and you certainly don't have to defend anything on that, because when Twilight came out, I was a grown ass woman in my 40s, and I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning just reading because I couldn't stop reading. It's about teenagers, vampires, by the way. Like 50 Shades of Grey wasn't really my type. Right. So we all have a type, each one of us. That one was like, yeah, I'm not really like hip on the torture thing. That doesn't really work for me. And the submissiveness. Yeah. Like, has anyone met me? That doesn't work for me. But the Twilight thing, I thought he was such a gentleman, you know, and he drove a really nice car. I love Volvos. So I was really hooked on Twilight. So I just, you know, I think about the books, and everyone's on the edge of their seat right now, Celeste. We're going to have to jump in and tell them what the books are. But, you know, sex and money are the two things that literally, I swear, keep us alive, and things that are so important to us in our lives. It's the way we're created, yet no one ever wants to talk about them. So read about it then if you want to read about it. But why do we go to the movies? We go to the movies to escape what's going on in our realities, to just kind of have a break, get entertainment, and enjoy ourselves. And I love that about your books, because you're providing other historical events too, that maybe some of us didn't even know happened, but in a digestible manner that we can understand it. Because I don't know about you, but history for me was like, I don't even understand all of that and how that happened, right? And so I'm not a dumb person. I'm a pretty smart person, but history wasn't my thing. Math was my jam, right? Science was my jam. Other people are like, yep, math and science, no thanks. So let's jump in and talk about the books. What is the name of your series of your books? Or is there one series? Is there several series? How many of them do you have? 4 series. Okay, let's talk about them real quick.
So the very first series I wrote, you know, when I kind of had my training wheels on as an author, was The Clan Sinclair. And I wanted to write a series about these siblings that are super tight knit. I knew that I wanted to write it in early 14th century Scotland. So Robert the Bruce time, kind of after Braveheart and William Wallace, but during that time period. And so I created this family of these 4, you know, towering Highlander brothers and their wee little sister, who is the spunkiest of them all. All of my heroines may have moments where they need their partner to help them, but they are not damsels in distress. They are all sword wielding and knife wielding and acerbically tongued women who can defend themselves, but they're looking for a partner to be able to do that. And the men, as alpha as they may be, respect and appreciate that they have found somebody who is an equal partner to them. And so I started writing this series. I started with the sister's story, because realistically, even though she was the youngest, she would have been the first one married off. And it just kind of built from there. And then I thought, well, you know, I really enjoyed writing Highlanders. I kind of also like reading Vikings. You know, if you like Highlanders, you probably like Vikings. I did not realize, because I did not do my proper market research, to understand that Vikings is even smaller niche. But I loved the 5-book series that I wrote there, because I had this villain who goes across all the books. And that series is a little grittier, a little bit more adventure based. And then I also wrote a 4-book pirate series. And that one is definitely my steamiest. That's the one that knocks on the door to 50 Shades. It's not quite 50 Shades, but it's knocking on the door.
25 Shades.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of my really good friends, when I first started writing, and I finally let people know, she's like, oh, so you write 50 Shades of Plaid. And I was like, oh, I don't know, but that ought to be my tagline. So in this case, it is a little bit more like 50 Shades of Plaid. And then the series that I'm working on right now, so those 3 series are all done. The Clan Sinclair's 6 books, Viking Glory is 5 books. Pirates of the Isle is 4 books. The series now, The Highland Ladies, I am on book 14 out of what will be 15. That one releases next month, and I'm going to start working on book 15 of that series. And that one, they all take part or take place, at least in part, at Robert the Bruce's royal court. And there's a lot more intrigue and there's a lot more clan dynamics. So the history comes in there. There's still the very strong romance, but there's always a lot of suspense and action in all of my stories. So it's not just the love story. There's stuff going on, things that are getting in the way of our hero and heroine being together, obstacles that they have to overcome. Often a battle is in need to do that. But like I said, all of my heroines are very self-sufficient in many ways and are very self-reliant. And I think that is important. And as I said before, I don't care for the stereotypes about our genre. Some of them are just, okay, whatever. Some of them are downright offensive. And so I want to write characters who do not play into those stereotypes, that do not perpetuate them, that are much more aligned with reality. Yes, the history was different. You can tell I'm kind of passionate about this. Yes, the history was different and roles for women were different, but inherently humans are humans and human nature doesn't change that much. Mm-hmm. And so how I write those stories is to keep them in line with historical perspective and make them historically real. But also part of that is having partnerships between my characters and having women who can be very assertive.
Well, let's tell everyone where they can find these books, how they can find more information about you as an author, and be able to follow you so that they know when your next books are coming out, and so that they can go back and start from the beginning in some of these series.
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is to go to my website. Just go to celestebarclay.com. You'll find out more about me, but you will find links to all of my books, ebooks, print, audio, all of that stuff. You can also subscribe to my bi-monthly newsletter and you will get a free download with that. And people who subscribe get some insider tips. They find out about sales and releases before other people do. You get some insights into what I'm doing as well. I love using my newsletter to interact. So I will often ask questions or survey things so that I can, know what my readers are up to. But if you go to celestebarclay.com, you will find me there. You'll find me on Facebook at Celeste N. Barclay. I threw in my initial. And you will find me on Clubhouse. That's like my new obsession. I'm on there probably too much. And Instagram, Twitter, I'm around on those. But Facebook's, if you're looking for me on social media, that's the way to go. And if all else fails, Google me. I do come up. It was a surprise to my husband. He was like, "You're the only one who comes up," because his name, he happens to share a name with a famous golfer. Yeah. And so it surprised him. And I was like, well, I am kind of important.
Yes, we should all Google ourselves. If you're not doing that and paying attention to that, you should. Absolutely. Yeah. So Celeste, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for paying attention about your characters when you're writing them in your books and portraying them as very strong women. I think that's important if women are reading these books. That's another area that they are inspired and motivated by to become a strong woman. So thank you so much for that. And Molly, again, thank you for being with us today. Today was amazing. I mean, talk about strong women. We now know their characters in Celeste's book. Molly, her work and mission is about lifting strong women, and so that they can raise other strong women and be models for other strong women. So we are definitely all in the same camp here today. So ladies, thank you so much for being with us. And I just want to leave my listeners with this one thing, which is, remember, you're the only you that's ever been. You're the only you that will ever be. So how you pioneer your future is up to you. You have the choice to be the strongest you possible. So dive in and listen to what you have to say and go with what your intuition's telling you. just like the ladies have done here today. So thank you for being with us. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now. Goodbye.